The Kingdom of Hyrule is perhaps the single most resilient country in fiction. Time and time again it has been led to incredible heights by powerful rulers. Extraordinary temples and castles erected from carved stone to honour its magnificence. Magic and advanced technology harnessed and wielded for its benefit. Massive armies trained and armed in its defence. But each grand achievement in Hyrule's history is balanced in equal measure with pain, suffering and loss. A timeless curse haunts the kingdom, and the host of this burning hatred never ceases in his quest for a single goal: power. But Hyrule rebuilds. By the time of Breath of the Wild, Ganon is remembered as a primal evil that has endured over the ages, a darkness that has appeared time and again throughout Hyrule's history. It is ancient beyond memory, a feral beast that is born anew in a cycle with no end, and during the events of the game we learn that it last appeared a century ago and seized control of Hyrule's armies of Sheikah-built war engines, turning them on the kingdom and its people. The truth behind this cyclical reincarnation is revealed to be Demise's curse at the end of Skyward Sword. The Demon King, implied to be the origin of all evil, the source of all monsters, spits a curse with his dying breath, which has doomed Hyrule ever since to an endless history of bloodshed and violence, spearheaded by the reincarnation of Demise's hatred, Ganondorf. Ganon is the big bad of the Zelda series, a being who embodies and desires power more than anything else. Link has fought Ganon across generations of Zelda games, against both man and beast, ever since the original game. The Big G isn't the only main villain in Zelda games. We've had Vati, Bellum, Majora, Malladus, the Windfish's Nightmares, and Demise, but Ganon is by far the most common antagonist. Ganon featured as the main villain of Breath of the Wild, and it seems its upcoming sequel too. This is one of only a few direct Zelda sequels, like how Ocarina of Time leads right into Majora's Mask, but the new game seems like it's continuing the story of the Great Calamity. Perhaps this game will finally bring an end to Ganon, the eternal, resurrecting plague on the Kingdom of Hyrule, and if it does, should he ever return? Have we seen too much Ganon? And should the Zelda series instead focus on other villains if his story is finished? Chronologically, Ganon's first appearance in the series is Ocarina of Time, where we see his transformation from the King of the Gerudo into the Demon Beast for the first time, fueled by his desire for the Triforce. But Ganon himself, of course, first appeared in the series all the way back in the original, in The Legend of Zelda on the NES. During development, Ganon was known as Hakai, in reference to Cho Hakai, the Japanese name for Zhu Baji, a character from the Chinese novel Journey to the West. Journey to the West was published in the late 16th century and is one of the most popular literary works in East Asia. Zhu Baji is a monster, half human and half pig, and his Buddhist name, Zhu Wuneng, means pig who rises to power. He was once the commander-in-chief of Heaven's armies, but after failing to seduce the goddess of the moon when drunk, he's reincarnated as a man-eating pig monster. He kidnaps the daughter of a village elder and uses a 9-toothed rake as a weapon. The connections between Zhu Baji and Ganon are clear. Both are power-obsessed, girl-stealing pig monsters who wield similar weapons in battle. But with Ganon, all of the redeeming qualities of his inspiration are gone. Shortly before the game, we learn that Ganon and his armies attacked Hyrule, seeking to plunge the world into fear and darkness under his rule with the power of the Triforce. He captured and imprisoned Princess Zelda within Death Mountain, holding with him the Triforce of Power. Of course, despite his strength, the Demon King is defeated by Link, after the hero rebuilds the shattered Triforce of Wisdom. Ganon didn't appear in the flesh in the game's sequel, Adventure of Link, which is a game about preventing the Demon King's resurrection. Though he remains dead, his evil presence still results in forces of darkness attacking Hyrule, and if Link falls, they pour his blood on Ganon's ashes, reviving the demon on the game over screen. A Link to the Past, the next game in the series, is by far Ganon's most iconic appearance in a 2D Zelda. The game takes place before both Zeldas 1 and 2, after a brutal conflict known as the Imprisoning War, which resulted in Ganon being sealed in the Sacred Realm along with the entire Triforce. He poisons this divine plane of reality and it becomes the Dark World, a twisted mockery of Hyrule that makes a monster out of anyone who treads there. Still trapped in this alternate world, Ganon siphons off a portion of his power and creates Aghanim, an alter ego with which he can begin to manipulate the politics of Hyrule, eventually gaining complete control of the kingdom by killing the king and brainwashing his armies, as well as attempting to break the seal on Ganon by capturing the descendants of the sages who created it. Although the Demon King wields the full might of the entire Triforce, he's ultimately stopped by Link in a climactic duel within the Pyramid of Power, where Master Sword meets Trident and man meets monster. Ganon's story developed further in the first 3D entry in the series, Ocarina of Time, which tells the story of Ganondorf, the ruthless leader of the Gerudo, who manipulates the King of Hyrule and you, the player, thereby taking control of the kingdom and seizing the Triforce of Power for himself. He's eventually stopped by Link, and in his rage he's transformed for the first time into the beast Ganon. Ocarina of Time splits the Zelda timeline 3 ways. The first split is an alternate timeline, a sort of what-if universe, where Link fails to stop Ganondorf and is defeated. This leads to the sages being forced to seal him, along with the entire Triforce, in the Sacred Realm, which leads on to the Downfall timeline with A Link to the Past. There's also the ending we see for Ocarina of Time. Ganondorf takes the Triforce of Power and gains control of Hyrule, but is stopped by Link after transforming into Ganon. Though much of Hyrule lies in ruins, the Demon King is defeated, but Link is sent back through time 7 years by Zelda to relive his youth. Here, in the past, he alters the course of history by warning a young Zelda about Ganondorf's plan, leading to his eventual arrest and execution, creating an alternate timeline of events in which Ganondorf never obtained the Triforce of Power from the Sacred Realm and never took control of Hyrule. We see these two alternate timelines explored in Ocarina of Time's 3D sequels. The Wind Waker, set centuries after Ganon's defeat in the adult timeline, tells a story of a world that was flooded by the gods to stop Ganon's return when a hero did not arise to meet him. The Ganondorf of the Wind Waker is manipulative and psychotic, but more reserved than other iterations of the character we see. Twilight Princess takes place at around the same time as The Wind Waker, only in the alternate timeline created by Link when he warned Zelda. Ganondorf was captured and set to be executed for his crimes, though in his final moments, in what can only be described as a cruel joke from the gods, he obtained the Triforce of Power and refused to die. He instead was sealed within the Twilight Realm as a last resort. From this strange, forgotten dimension, Ganondorf begins once again to manipulate and extort his way towards control of Hyrule and the Triforce. In both Twilight Princess and The Wind Waker, Ganondorf gets a pretty final-looking death. In the former, he's run through with the Master Sword in the glowing wound left from the execution attempt from the sages, and in The Wind Waker, he's stabbed through the skull with the Master Sword, turned to stone, and then left at the bottom of the ocean as the old Hyrule is destroyed with a Triforce wish. So we follow Ganondorf's story across 3 separate timelines, including the alternate timeline where Link fails, leading to A Link to the Past. After he's killed by another Link, he's resurrected by Twin Rover during the Linked Oracle games. But the ritual is botched, and Ganon returns as a mindless beast. Perhaps because of this botched execution, the Ganon we see for the rest of this timeline, in A Link Between Worlds and Zelda 1, is, for the most part, devoid of any of the intelligence or cunning he had in Ocarina of Time or A Link to the Past. Ganon also appears in Four Swords Adventures, though things are a little different. Even though this game is supposedly set after Twilight Princess, where Ganondorf met a pretty clear violent end, we again see Ganondorf, stealing the trident from the Desert Pyramid and becoming the boar demon Ganon. However, this isn't the same Ganondorf as the one seen in every other Zelda game he appears in. It's meant to be a reincarnation, an entirely different Gerudo man named Ganondorf, who also falls down a dark path in pursuit of power, influenced by Demise's curse. So we actually see two different Ganons in the series. The original, who appears in almost every game from Ocarina of Time to the original to the Wind Waker, and a reincarnation, who appears in Four Swords Adventures. We don't know for sure what Ganon it is we see in Breath of the Wild, only that they have existed for so long that they're seen more as a natural disaster than a human threat. The calamity strikes in cycles of 10,000 years, a mindless storm of fury and malice. By the time of Breath of the Wild, the events of every other Zelda game are so far in the past that details like what timeline this is simply don't matter. It's far enough in the future that everything before it is lost to the era of myth. In this sense, the Calamity can almost be considered its own separate Ganon, entirely disconnected from the Gerudo man it once was. That is, until Breath of the Wild's sequel, where it's revealed that somewhere deep below Hyrule, Ganondorf's physical body still exists, and still lives. Somehow, possibly for tens of thousands of years, the Gerudo King has survived as little more than a living corpse, possibly controlling and directing the Great Calamities in secret. Which leads to the question, if his physical body exists below Hyrule, then is the Great Calamity above anything more than a phantom? Was Dark Beast Ganon just a projection of this Ganondorf's malice? Breath of the Wild is deliberately vague on the details of what the Great Calamity is, and that's because the characters of its world don't know what it is. It's a mysterious, cataclysmic evil that attacks without warning. It can't be talked to or reasoned with, only stopped by force. Even after Link frees Zelda from Hyrule Castle and the pair eradicate the Calamity in its entirety, we aren't any closer to understanding what it is. Breath of the Wild's sequel looks set to give us these answers, the truth about the Calamity. If the first game was about freeing Hyrule from its clutches, the second might be about its origins, and stopping it, for good, at its source. But theories aside, we know next to nothing about this Ganondorf, his plan, or how he connects with Breath of the Wild and the larger Zelda story as a whole. His return has got a lot of people excited, myself included, but has also got a few people saying, is it time we moved past Ganon? If Breath of the Wild 2 ends the story of the Great Calamity, should the Zelda series retire Ganon as the series' main antagonist? When looking at the entire Zelda series, Ganon has appeared, or will appear, in 11 Zelda games, out of a total of 20, a little over half. For the series' most iconic and recognisable villain, half isn't a huge amount. Compare that to Mario games that feature Bowser as the main antagonist, for example. But the numbers are skewed a little more if we only look at 3D Zelda games, which are arguably the most popular, memorable entries in the series, where we find that we've seen Ganon in 5 out of 7 3D Zelda games, a little over 70%. Ganondorf, however, is less common than you'd expect. Excluding Four Swords Adventures, where we don't actually see his Gerudo form, he's only appeared in Ocarina of Time, The Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and now Breath of the Wild's upcoming sequel. Even if you feel that the series is oversaturated with Ganon, Ganondorf is much less common. While Ganon began as simply a pure evil pig monster inspired by a Chinese literary character, he's evolved over the course of the series. Ganon is now inextricably linked to the Triforce, alongside Link and Zelda, as the third piece of a trifecta that is at the core of what the series is. Just like how the series would feel strange without Link as the main protagonist or without Zelda as Hyrule's princess, games without Ganon feel like they're missing something integral to the series. This often works in the game's favour, like with Majora's Mask, a game that's largely without even Princess Zelda, which throws Link into an uncomfortable, surreal world completely alone. I'd love to see more weird Zelda games with strange new villains, especially new 3D entries. Demise essentially fills the same role as Ganon, meaning Majora's Mask is the only 3D Zelda without Ganon or Ganon's precursor as its villain. I'd love to see different antagonists take aim at Hyrule, but not for good. I don't think anyone could replace Ganon as the series' main villain. Even if Breath of the Wild 2 is designed as a climactic final act for Ganon, and the Zelda team intends to close the book on the series' most iconic villain after it, I don't want to see the end. He's too good a villain, he's too powerful, too iconic, and seeing his story evolve alongside the Zelda series as a whole is brilliant. Because of how his story evolves, Ganon isn't even always the same villain between games. The Ganon that appears in one game can be drastically different to the Ganon from another. Take the Wind Waker's aged, regal Ganondorf and compare him to the Oracle's mindless, raging beast. Or compare Ocarina of Time's manipulative thief to the Lovecraftian horror of the Calamity. Just like how the series itself constantly changes its appearance and style while keeping its core intact, Ganon does too. And now, with Breath of the Wild sequel, we're getting the second part of an essentially unfinished story. This game could show us the end of Ganondorf, a man who has fallen so far since he was king of the Gerudo. The sequel might answer who this corpse, covered in Gerudo symbols and with malice in his eyes, was in life. Does it connect back to Ocarina of Time's Ganondorf, or is it an entirely separate reincarnation? Whatever the case is, I'm over the moon that the sequel is continuing to explore what Ganon is in this new world. Just like how the beast rises just when Hyrule has rebuilt, Ganon will most likely follow the series every time it rebuilds. A game like Breath of the Wild, which so drastically changed what it means to be a Zelda game, needed Ganon as its villain, even if it was a Ganon that was wildly different to any other, to keep the game connected to its roots. Zelda games have appeared on every major Nintendo console since the NES, from 2D to 3D, handhelds to console to hybrid, but the DNA of the series has remained constant. At its core, the three iconic wielders of the Triforce. Even if Breath of the Wild 2 shows us the end of the story of Calamity Ganon, I'm excited to see his next appearance. Have you had enough of Ganon, and would you prefer to see an original villain after Breath of the Wild sequel? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you like this video, leave a like, or subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.